All right, guys, we want to be completely respectful of your time and get you out of here right at 1 o'clock. We'd like to welcome you to Summit Funding's monthly mastermind. Today, we have one of our favorite guests and one of our best speakers, hands down, Marjorie Adam. She is a national real estate coach. She's also one of the top realtors in America. And I could keep going on and on and on, but Marjorie, you've been here a couple of times before. We'd just like to publicly say thank you so much for doing this for us. I know you're going to be at the event next month, which you'll talk about too. Thank you for everything you do for us and for realtors in general. We really appreciate you and are very honored to have you today.
Oh, thank you. So I think it's super important. I think what Summit does to help the realtors and learn and educate, and we help each other. Look, we're all going to make it through this, or we're all going to suffer through this. So I think us being together, learning, sharing best practices, the more that we can really talk about what's happening out there and how we're working through it and how we're finding success in our listings if we're a realtor or our buyer partners is really important. And so this is a constantly evolving thing. So I was out in Eugene, I think a couple months ago, and I was doing a presentation on the buyer lawsuits and everything. And while, yes, we're still proceeding forward, everyone's now trying to figure their way out through it. So I just wanted to start and think, okay, there's a lot of change right now in our industry, massive change, a massive confusion. And if you think the confusion has started, it is going to get worse because all the states right now have to come up with their new forms and their new contracts and their new listing agreements. And that has to be done by the 17th of August. And so I don't know, I'm sure some of you, I can't see all of you, but say hi if you're in California, because it started with you. So California released all of their new documents, their listing agreements, their buyer agency agreements. They wanted to send them out, I think it was June 21st. And by June 22nd, the DOJ said, nah, not so fast, right? And so one day, so nice, one day, made it one day with these new documents, had to redo them. And have reshifted them. And just so you know, that's the same everywhere. I'm here in Virginia. VAR, Virginia Association of Realtors, released a bunch of documents. The DOJ is going to step in on those because there's not enough change. So there's going to be several months of confusion, just so, well, who knows how many, because now that the new forms are coming out and that the watchdog groups, so the biggest one is the Consumer Federation of America. So they are watching all of these associations as the new documents roll out, and they're saying not so fast, not enough change. So listing agreements are changing, buyer agency agreements are changing, how we're allowed to word things are changing. So it's going to be a few months of chaos for sure. So as we go through that, I was like, okay, so when I did this talk last time, I said, how many people, and I can't see all your hands, but how many people are worried about the changes right now? Like if you raise your hand, are you worried about what's happening in the industry? Okay, so how many people aren't? So I will tell you more people are worried than not. And I think it's okay to be worried. I think it's okay to think, ooh, there's a lot of change and chaos going on right now, but change is inevitable and it's here. So starting back months ago when I started talking about this, people were like, it's not a big deal. Things aren't really going to change. They're going to just, we're going to hear a little noise and it's going to go back to the way it's always been. No. That is a clear no. That's a big no. It is not going to go back to the way it's always been. So this is an opportunity. I promise you it's an opportunity. Now we have to work through it, especially on local association levels, state association levels, as well as even if we're talking about, I'm a realtor on the real estate side, we have to figure out on the lending side, by the way, you're probably as a realtor going to need to send your buyer agency agreement to the lender. The lender is going to have to understand your compensation. So all these things that we've never had to do that I'm sorry, up until now, if someone called me and said, I need a copy of your buyer agency representation, I'd have been like, no, I'm not sending you that. So I think there's a lot of confusion. So we're going to work through this, but I will tell you right now, it is absolutely an opportunity. I think that we have to be working on our mindset. And that's the biggest thing. As I travel around to everyone, even if people aren't especially worried, they're super worried about how things might change, how it's going to be presented, what they're hearing in the media, or how they're feeling. And I will tell you, a lot of people, and I coach a lot of people that sell a lot of real estate, are stuck, super stuck. They're like, okay, lots of change, a lot of noise, rates are still high, my inventory is not as great, my listing inventory isn't as high, what do I do? Okay, so I don't know if you guys are readers, but you need to be. So I'm going to recommend a couple books. So I want you to read them. And so anyone that comes to Texas, you're going to be able to tell me if you read it. So lenders, you too, realtors and lenders. Okay. So I want you to read Compound Effect. It's called The Compound Effect. Talks about daily routines, building great habits, habits you need to adapt. There's a big theme in all these books. If you read enough of them, you're like, yeah. There's the 5-second rule. There's Atomic Habits. Those are 3. The Power of Moments. Amazing book. And I'll send a recap on this too, just in case. And plus we'll record this. Miracle Morning and Level Up. So I see people kind of just looking at me, but you should read these books. So people that are like, I don't read, then listen to them. Have someone else tell you about them, whatever, get the Cliffs Notes. But really right now, if we think about it, what most people are stuck with is their habits, and really fighting through things. So I'm coaching people on for hitting goals, micro actions they have to take. Because I think we all think, oh, I've got to do these massive actions, and you don't. It's lots of little actions repeated, right? So I'm just telling you right now, people that are struggling the most, there are actions you need to be taking, and I'm going to coach you on through some of them right now. But the actions you need to be taking is your time blocking, your morning routines, all those things that you're like, it's kind of boring. I don't want someone else to tell me about them. And I get it. But through these routines, through the choices we're making right now on what we're going to learn. Oh, someone said, do you recommend increasing your negotiation skills? Yes, yes, I do. That's going to be important. But I'm just telling you right now, if I can feel, if I could have a couple months ago been like, whoop, I'm feeling a little like I'm a hamster on a wheel. So I'm sure no one else feels that way. I'm sure no one has that at all. Then I've really got to step back a little bit and go, okay, what is it that I'm really working on? What have I done? And what is stopping me from doing what I need to do? So we're going to talk about that because your mindset right now is super important. What are you focusing on right now? Again, the people that are most stressed are focusing on, oh, things are changing. It's just getting too hard. I'm not having fun. And the people that I think are really succeeding and growing right now are saying, hey, I've really started listening to more podcasts. I've actually read and fully understand the NAR lawsuit. So just so we're clear, like this is my file on the lawsuits, all the notes I've taken, the complete lawsuit that I read. These are classes I've been to. I've done a lot of work on this. And you guys as professionals have to as well. Now you can read some abridged versions. NAR has an FAQs if you don't want to read the entire very long report. But if you're not spending the time right now to learn this, it's a problem. If you're not really, like if you're in California, I shouldn't be telling you about the Inman article, right? About the California Association of Realtors issues with their forms. That's things that we have to know more than our clients know. So right now, I'm telling you, read Inman News. You can pay for it. I think it's like $69 a year for the basics. And I read Inman News. Now, there's a lot of it that the blah, blah, and the famous who, whatever's, I don't care about that. But I do care about the lawsuits, the news, anything the DOJ is involved with, any forms I need to be aware of. I'm doing a lot of podcasts, and realtors right now, if your brokers aren't offering you a lot of education on what's happening, on really what you need to say and what you need to be adding to your presentations. And for those of you, and man, there's a lot of you that aren't doing buyer consultations, you must be doing them now. Must, have to, must. So let's go through this, right? So I want you to really, if I could do this, I did this when I was in Oregon, but I really wish that right now I could be live with all of you and say, okay, I would pull someone out and they'd be really not happy about it and say, I need you to explain to me as if I'm a consumer what the lawsuits are all about. Hey, Jonas, I heard about these lawsuits. Man, I guess you're not getting paid, right? Like they're saying whatever. And I need you to be able to have a clear explanation of what's really happening. And here's the thing. I think that you need to do it without emotion and defense. So when I talk to a lot of people, and this is the clearest thing, this is a reality of what's happening. We are having, these changes, but you have to succinctly explain them, not in a, oh, girl, you're going to pay me kind of way, but in a, this is what's happening. So we're going to talk about that right now. We're going to go through it. if there's anything you get from today, it's that you need to be able to run into somewhere, wherever it is, especially in an appointment, of course, but in a grocery store, in a coffee shop. And if they've paid attention to this news, they're like, oh, the lawsuits, are you freaking out? Nope. And we're going to teach you how to first respond and then what to say. Because I think people, if you're a realtor, you're immediately going to, I charge X% and this is my fee and you are going to pay me and I don't care what anybody says, I'm going to get paid. And it's like, slow your roll, right? Let's take a step back and answer this question. So what do you say, right? And lenders, same thing. Like, what do you say if someone comes in? And for me, the lender can now be, and by the way, more and more might be the first step. I will tell you, most of my clients, they come to me and then I refer them to a lender. So maybe 20% of the time it's vice versa. I think it's going to become more. So lenders, I need you that are listening on this call to also be able to succinctly explain this so that when they get to the realtor, yes, we can talk about it, but that there's no confusion.
Amazing.
Okay. I don't know who said that, but someone's there.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Some learning, some education, and some drunkenness.
someone's learning. Okay. So right now, what do you say? Now I'm going to tell you the first thing you're going to say. Okay. When someone says to you, hey, whatever your name is, what exactly is happening with the lawsuits? You're going to say, please just write this down. And we're going to record it, but I want you to write this down. I am glad. I'm so glad that you have asked me this question, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. If you don't mind me asking, what have you heard? I'm going to say it again. I'm glad you asked. I am so glad. So I'm so glad you asked. There's so much misinformation out there. If you don't mind me asking me, what have you heard? So that is exactly the opposite of what most of us want to do, right? We want to be like, oh, this is just, blah, and we're going to start our, blah. So stop. So that's what you're going to say, because most of the time they've heard complete nonsense or they've heard a little bit of the truth. But usually what they've heard is, girl, you're not going to get paid. I don't have to pay anyone anymore. Ironic. That's not in the lawsuit at all. So please do that. Take a step back, smile, right? Because, again, we all want to be like, I'm going to get paid. Nope. Understand the question. This is why also totally different class. But many people, when they're competing for listings and the seller says, what's your commission? Y'all cave and start negotiating. It's a question that you just answer. So
Close enough.
Right? So here, let me tell you about the settlement. I'm so glad you asked. So let's say they said, I heard you're not getting paid. Well, actually, you guys are clear that's not true. There are two main components to the lawsuit. Two. One is that the compensation field that was in the MLS is gone. In our area, August 5th, nationally, the 14th or the 17th. So there will no longer be compensation offered in the MLS. This does not mean there cannot be compensation offered or paid. It is not going to be a field in the MLS, number one. Number two, that if I were to show a buyer a house, I have to have a written buyer agency agreement prior to meeting them and showing them the house. Now, there's a bunch of other nuances. We have to say in any listing agreement that the compensation is negotiable. There's a few other things, but the two main parts of the lawsuit are those two things. That's it. That's what the lawsuit's about. Now, there's a lot of the forms are changing, how we can write it in. Now you have to actually probably write your compensation into contracts, which you couldn't do before. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of changes from that, but that's what the lawsuit said. Okay. Did you hear me say, I can't charge this, I must charge this, you can pay this, you don't pay this? No. And that's where I think most of us go off the rails, because we'll play this through and someone will say, well, I charge 3%, and I'm just 3%, 3 chickens, doesn't matter. Let's not standardize it. And that's what I charge. And by the way, that's what I'm gonna get paid. And so if the seller isn't paying me, then you're going to pay me that because that's what I charge. It's like, stop. That's not what it is. You're going to have a consultation about that and fees. But what the lawsuit said were those two things. So I need you guys to really, 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 really clearly understand this, because I think as we are the leaders of our industry, we have to, number one, explain it. And number two, I think if you're doing it right and you can really grasp it, you say, I'm really excited about this proposed settlement. It's actually still proposed, by the way, because the DOJ is involved, but I love the additional transparency it brings to our process. I love that when I sit down with my clients, I've always been very clear, and we've always done buyer consultations. Let's say you haven't. I love that we get to do a full consultation so that I can demonstrate my value to you and why you should choose working with me and why I charge the fee I charge. I think this is great for our industry. I think that we will have more informed clients. And I think that the realtors who prove their value and demonstrate why you should work with us are going to rise. The realtors who are great, by the way, negotiators, yes. The ones that really offer true value are going to rise, right? We're going to do really well. The people that can't and the people that aren't professionals that can't clearly communicate won't do as well. That's not such a bad thing, right? I mean, I think you should pick the best professional for you. So I think if you can have these conversations at a neutral emotion, right, that has nothing to do with what I could now get into, which is what I charge. It's two separate things. So I think the more that you can say, you know, hey, I think this will lead to buyers choosing stronger realtors who will represent them better, that will lead to smoother transactions for both the sellers and the buyers. I think anyone would agree, like when you have a strong buyer's agent and a strong listing agent, things go better. Right. So if that's what this is going to bring, then that's not a bad thing. So we've got to kind of take the emotion out of it, right? And say change is inevitable. There will be more changes. By the way, we're working through a lot of them. There's a lot of things that are not clear right now, like the forms. Like I took a listing 3 weeks ago. The listing agreement's different now. Our office is saying we can't use them. So I don't know what form I'm supposed to use, right? Some of that's very interesting as we work through it. But I want you guys to really think about it. So what do you say, right? So when your clients ask these questions, and how do you bring it up? So I will also tell you, a lot of people tell me, I'm just not going to talk about it unless they talk about it. That's a big mistake. That is a huge mistake. To me, we sit down, I'm going to go into my presentation, and yes, I have a buyer consultation. I will be teaching it. We're going to do an event in Texas. I will teach that. And I taught it in Oregon. Happy to help all you guys in different areas and teach you that. There's a listing presentation. Here's the crazy thing to me. So all the realtors that are listening, and I'm not faulting you, everyone's businesses went the way they did, but I've never met a realtor in my career that didn't have a listing presentation of some sort. Now, let's be clear. Some people are like, I just show up and I list the house. That's a listing presentation. Okay. But there was a process. You had to have a listing agreement signed. You couldn't go, yeah, I'm listing this house. Nope, I don't have any documentation signed. Nope, we all like each other. We thought that's cool. Like we'll just work together. That's not how it worked, right? And so for those of you who hadn't used buyer agency agreements and hadn't done buyer consultations, you're not going to have a choice. Because remember, the second part of this was prior to showing someone a house, you have to have an agreement signed. So how do you do that if you've never done it? And that's the things you have to be thinking about. I mean, literally, if a buyer wants to call you on the phone and says, I want you to show me 123 Main Street, you can't do it without an agreement. You can't. And if you think I'm just going to keep doing it, I'm not going to worry about it because this is how I've done business, I can assure you that your broker will hear it, or you will hear it, or something is going to happen. The regulation is coming. So the quicker you make this change part of your business, the better it's going to go. Right. So I would love to hear from anyone that's listening, a question you have. I would love to hear a struggle you're having, or if you're not doing a consultation, if you're struggling with people saying, why should I pay an agent? Because I hear this a lot. I have people that are listing agents that say, I just tell the seller, I don't care if they pay a buyer's agent. I don't know what that's all about, but are you guys having struggles with anything that we can talk about? Because I assure you, if you're struggling with it, someone across the country is as well. So has anyone got something they want to go over that they want to share?
Marjorie, I'd like to ask you a question from the lending side, since there's a lot of lenders on here. I am starting to have more and more people coming to get pre-qualified in my office, asking me why they need an agent. Everything they've seen on the media says they should be able to do it themselves, or they should be able just to go to the listing agent and get it discounted. They don't need a buyer's agent anymore. talk on that, but then Marjorie, coach us as the lenders that are sitting here. How should we respond to that? My normal is to go right to why you need an agent, but what should our starter response to that statement? Because I'm hearing it more and more.
So I would flip it again. I mean, really, because again, my first instinct is, do you know how hard it is, right? Like I want to just justify. It's like, well, you know, for me, it's almost like if it were you, Jonas, and you said, I don't need a realtor. Well, so why do you think you don't need a realtor? I mean, really, like if someone meets with you, because realtors think about this, we have to understand the objection. So what we all do way too often is we answer a question without understanding the objection. Right. We're just used to so like, what's your commission? You know, it's, well, here it is. So the same here. Why do I need to work with a buyer's agent? Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe you don't. Right. Why do you think you don't need an agent? Oh, and the things that always crack me up. These are what we always hear. I found the house. They didn't even find the house. Wow. You can use the internet. Awesome. You are amazing. 100% of people, by the way, use the internet. So gosh, you found 123 Main Street. Okay. Now you got to get in it and you have to compete for it most likely. And we have to make sure that you're qualified for it. And then we have to structure an offer on it. And then you need to understand what inspections you should get. And then we have to get you through the process. Like finding the house is the smallest part of a process. So I don't know about your areas, but I can tell you in our area, if you've been an unrepresented purchaser in the last 3 years, you ain't buying a house because people have to construct an offer to win in a negotiation. And I can promise you an unrepresented purchaser, number one, is not going to win in a negotiation. That's number one. But two, have they done this before? Like, because I will also tell you, here's an issue that we have as buyer agents. We made it look easy. Right? If I did my job, so Jonas, I'm going to say, hey, you bought a house. Was it easy? Like, was it easy? Right? No. So let's say you said it was. Let's just say you was like, oh my gosh, it was easy. Great. You had a great realtor. Congratulations. Because we make it look easy. So the seller wouldn't move. They weren't going to fix something. All of the things that happen that we insulate you from and take you through is because you had a great realtor. Right? So I'm just telling you, representation, I think we need to ask, so why would you not need representation? Or what's the thing you need most? What do they want from us? Negotiation is number one. Communication. So by the way, we got to do some ownership as a group of realtors because a lot of people like, they didn't communicate with me. That's the second thing that they're going to complain about. Poor negotiation, which by the way, in the market lately, if someone sits with you and go, how much negotiation have you been able to get off of sale price? Not a lot because people are paying over asking, but lack of communication. But it's also, by the way, lack of a consultation, right? Where I need to understand your financing, your needs, your wants, the process. We have to do a better job in educating them. So frankly, it's just like a seller in the end though. So I'll have sellers that call me and say, hey, you know, I don't want to pay you, but I want you to sell my house. And I'm like, no, like, that's not how this works. If they want no realtor, they get no realtor, right? So I think the benefit is, what is it that we provide? And hence the value is what we have to be clear on. What is my value, right? And so I think, Jonas, when they come in, the question you asked too was if they come to you as the lender, it's like, listen, in this market, I can tell you it's highly competitive, and without representation, it is very hard to understand the market. Number one, understand a 10-page, 12-page, 15, 25, whatever page contract, understand the contingencies that you might need to give up or don't, and then are going to guide you through every step of this process to closing. You are buying the largest investment of your life. This is the stuff that kills me. Like you are making your primary investment. You are buying your home, probably the number one purchase. And you're thinking, I'll just do this myself, right? Like that is just something I can't understand, frankly. But if they're going to interview 3 realtors, unless the realtors say, this is my process, this is what I offer you, this is how I'm going to save you time. Look, I'm solving a problem. The problem they have is they need to purchase a home. And the way I'm going to solve it is I'm going to take care of this, right? I'm going to cover this. I'm going to take you through inspections. I'm going to have your house cleaned before you move in. I'm going to meet your moving truck if you need me to, right? I'm going to provide value because they want to solve problems, save time, and get a house, right? So I think if we can't really clearly, and you guys can't say, listen, the point of having a realtor, right, is through all of these steps that you need to have. It is invaluable if the person is guiding you properly for what you need to do. Because I can, like I said, I can give, and here's the thing, this is some stories and statistics. I think are another things I want you guys to all write down, stories and statistics, because you need to know both. So I've got a bunch of realtors on here. Let's ask a couple questions. I can't really hear y'all, but how many home buyers in the United States hire buyer agents? What percentage of home buyers in the US hire a buyer agent? Anyone know? Any guesses? Even in your own rooms, because then when I say the number, I want to hear if I'm right. Oh, 80, 65, 80. Oh,
90.
50, 89. 89% of home buyers work with a realtor. And by the way, I decided, because I just told you stories, right?
Oh, we eat that. It's like 3 meals.
Someone's eating. Stories and statistics, right? Do you know what it was 10 years ago? So it's 89% now. This is important because I think as you all are looking at the difference, we would argue the difference in the market, right? Right now we're hearing you don't need a realtor and people don't need a realtor and realtors don't do anything. 10 years ago it was 88%. It's gone up 1% in 10 years, right? Why do you know that? Why do you need to know that? And why is it important to us as realtors? Well, I want to find the home buyers that find value in working with me. I am not interested in chasing down a bunch of people that say, I don't want to work with a realtor. Awesome. Now I'm going to try to explain to you why you should, but I'm not here to convert the inconvertible, right? Like I'm also not calling FSBOs. I'm sorry. If you want to put a sign in your yard because you don't want to pay me, have at it. If you are failing and you want to call me after, when you know the statistics on FSBOs, which you all should know too, but if you think about it, that's 89% of people. So let's argue that these lawsuits take out 10%. 10% of people disappear. Okay, so now we're at 79%. I still have plenty of buyers. So I think if we pay attention, I've got to pay attention. 10%, what percent was it 10 years? 88. 89% now, 88% 10 years ago. Yeah, much more competitive than it was 10 years ago. Yes, absolutely. It's much more competitive than it was 10 years ago. But here's the thing. Now we have this news that they don't need to pay us. So let's carry this through as realtors too, though. So one thing Jonas said too is I'll go directly to the listing agent. All right, but play this through, because remember the totality of this lawsuit. So I'm gonna use Jonas just because I can see him. He's the first on my screen. So Jonas calls me and says, hey, you have 123 Main Street listed. It's your listing. I'd like to see it. So I would love to hear, I want you guys to write that down. Hey, 123, just what is listed. I'd like to see it. And you guys need to role play this, because what's the conversation need to look like? Think about what I just told you about the suits. Cool. So I'm the listing agent. They're calling me and I say, that's great. Are you working with a realtor? Nope. Don't want a realtor. Don't want to pay a realtor. That cracks me up. I'm dealing with this right now, by the way. What percentage of buyers sign buyer broker agreements prior to NAR? I don't know. I think if there had been a higher percentage, we wouldn't have had the lawsuits. In Virginia, in my office, you had to, so it's not a change for us. But at this point, it's going to be 100%, right, that have to sign. But sorry, I just saw the question. But so if someone calls me, I say, are you working with a realtor? And they say, no. Okay, so you're an unrepresented purchaser. Yep. So you're first now going to sign a statement that you are an unrepresented purchaser prior to me showing you this house. Because I'm not your buyer's agent, right? I have to have a buyer agency agreement. Now I'm going to make you sign an unrepresented purchaser agreement. And secondly, I need you to be clear that that agreement has nothing to do with my compensation. Because why do they not want to have a realtor? Because they don't want to pay them. Well, they're not paying me because my agreement is with my seller on what I will get paid if there's an unrepresented buyer. And I will get paid. So what I choose to get paid is up to me and the seller. But if you guys aren't having these conversations as you sit in listings, number one, about the different types of compensation, which we can go over. And number two, what you're going to do if there is an unrepresented purchaser, you're going to do a lot of work and now maybe not get paid. And I'm not willing to do that. So when they come to me, as this person who's been texting me for 3 days said, I don't have a realtor. And so I'm going to take out 3%, not yours to negotiate, mine, not yours. The fact that you're not here doesn't mean there's compensation taken out. However, I highly recommend you go get a realtor, because what you're trying to do is negotiate against me. You're unrepresented. My client's represented. I work for them. I represent them, not you. Right? So it's not going to go that well for you, right? Like I'm just saying, so I'm going to represent them in my best capacity versus no representation on your side. Can you role play a buyer who calls you as the listing agent, wants to work with you to save money? Yeah, I'm kind of doing that now, right? Where it's like, hey, so they want first, number one, my office doesn't do dual agency. So we do not participate in dual agency. And two, if you think the DOJ is done and within, I don't know, 18 months, let's pick a time period, they don't do away with dual agency, that's going to be gone. Because if you guys know your history, buyer's agency in Virginia came about 1990 because it used to be everyone was a sub-agent of the seller, probably in your areas too. There was no such thing as buyer agency. Everyone worked for the seller. And the buyer said, wait a minute, we need our own representation. And so buyer agency came along, which by the way, is why the seller pays the commission, because it was the buyer's agent or a sub-agent that was paid back in the 90s. And then sub-agency disappeared and buyer agency remained because nobody was a sub-agent anymore. The sellers pay the commission because of the structure and how it was. So people don't understand that. You guys need to too. But when someone calls me and says, I want to see your listing and I'm going to save money because I'm unrepresented, I explain to them, by the way, they probably won't, because I'm not negotiating a commission that's not theirs. That doesn't make sense. I'm a buyer. I don't have a realtor. I'm coming to you. You're going to do your entire job. I just chose not to have a realtor, but I'm not going to pay you. Well, that's cool. Doesn't matter the lawsuit pre or post. I'm going to have negotiated that ahead. And if you guys aren't doing it now, you better, because that's going to happen more and more. Now, if you do dual agency, you're going to have to figure out how that works. We don't do that. So if you're a dual agent, you're going to have to figure out from your seller first, right? Are they willing to pay you if you're a dual agent? And if you're not, when that buyer calls you, you have to say, great, I would be representing you. This is my fee. Well, I won't pay that fee. Well, I guess you got to find someone who will work for that fee, because it's not me. Right? So we have to be super clear on that. So the save money thing happens all the time. It's been happening. I'm 28 years in, and understand the commission, especially before, still now, but before the seller paid commission. It was always funny to me when a buyer said, I don't have a realtor. I need you to show me this house today at 4 and I'm going to not pay you. I was like, well, that's comical. You don't get to decide and I don't work for free. So I think we have to be clear on that still now, right? We don't work for free. So that's going to be something you guys all need to determine. For us, if an unrepresented buyer calls on one of my listings, they have to be unrepresented. The commission is not part of the discussion because they're not paying me, and they have to sign that form before I can show them the house. For you guys, you'd have to figure out how you're going to get them to sign a buyer agency agreement. You can do limited. By the way, you guys know you can do like a one-time showing agreement. So if someone calls you off the internet and says, I want to see 123 Main Street, and they're not ready to commit, because frankly, if I've never met, so I'm going to pick on like Sean, I see Sean Brennan. Hey, if I have never met him and he says, you're committed to me for 6 months, I'd be like, no, I don't think so. I've never met you, but I want to see this house. I'd love to talk to you. And Sean says, we need to do a consultation first, as he should. So I'm going to get on Zoom or in person. Let's say I can't. Sean, I need to see this house. And Sean says, fine, we can sign a 1 week, 1 day, whatever it is, or exclusive to a home buyer agency agreement. But then we're going to have to sit down and we're going to go over this. So if you guys aren't doing that, that's going to have to be part of your practice too. And I think about it as respecting you and then educating the client. And by the way, you don't have a choice anymore. So what you're going to hear most of the time is, what do you mean? I want to see this house. What do you mean I got to sign an agreement? I've never signed an agreement before. Wait, I don't know. Hey, have you heard about the lawsuits? Yeah, I heard all about them. How do we respond? Great. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Let me know what you've heard and we can discuss, right? And you need to take 2 minutes and say, here's the rule. Here's the rule. I have to do this. You want to see this house. We've got to sign this agreement. Can you come into my office at 3? We can go over consultation, buyer agency, see if we're a good fit for each other. I need you to sign that agreement before we meet. So that's going to have to be part of your practice. And people are like, oh, I don't know. No, I know. That's just going to be the way it is. So the faster we adapt to that, the better. Now someone, ooh, yay. Okay, I've got questions. Hold on. If the potential buyer signs a one-time buyer agency agreement and I show the home, but another agent writes the contract, ooh, do I have a leg to stand on? Does the second agent get paid? I think that the way that those agreements should read is so I'll see someone else. So Kayla, I can see Kayla. So if Kayla's the buyer and Kayla, I show her 123 Main Street, I'm going to write in that if Kayla buys 123 Main Street, I will be paid my compensation of X. So to me, I don't see that agent has a leg to stand on in that case, right? Because we've got an agreement, someone else coming in, sure, they could have another agreement, but they have a signed agreement with me for that home. Now, if they want to go buy a house down the street, I don't have any agreement with them for that. But I think you have a leg to stand on. Absolutely. Now, do I have a leg to stand on the second agent get paid? No, I still think you have a leg to stand on because they signed an agreement with you. Now, if they said, look, I'll sign it, but remember, there's always a start and end date. So I'm trying to play this question through. If you signed it for a week, right? If you said, hey, it'll be for a week long for this house, because you can't sign it forever, right? There's no end of time agreement. So I guess the only way you wouldn't have a leg to stand on if someone else, shows it to them, let's say it's 2 weeks later, right? And your agreement is over. Now, again, procuring cause and all those things, that's a whole other argument that we can talk about. Can listing agents still share the commissions with the buyer's agent? Oh, so that's the biggest thing in the language. So funny enough, the answer is yes and no. And then you're like, good, goodbye. That makes no sense. So if you look, like we'll use this article for California. So there were a lot of changes, except the form now doesn't allow that. So that person, when you sign a listing agreement, your body of your listing agreement is going to say what you charge. So I'm Marjorie Adam, I'm the listing agent, I charge X, whatever my fee is. Then there are going to be addendums or something in the agreement that talk about concessions or commissions that can be paid. It's no longer going to be, so I'm at Nest Realty. So I'm at Nest and Nest is paid X%. Let's just use 6 for conversation. Next is paid 6 and is offered to share 3 with whatever other company. It's not going to be that way anymore. It's going to be Marjorie at Nest receives, let's say it's 3. And then there'll be another document, which will say that, the seller is offering a concession or a fee or whatever to that other agent. So I think they're going to be split, which is what DOJ wants. And one thing that's going to be very different for all of us, and that's going to be part of these documents, before commissions, at least in Virginia, so I'm always careful when we talk, nationally, commissions were not in the contract ever. We had our listing agreement, we had the field and MLS, and we had commission disbursements. Now your commissions are going to be part of that contract as a buyer agent, because let's hear me clearly. So my broker and I are having another meeting. We're having a big class on this in 2 weeks. If I have a listing agreement moving forward that says that I'm going to get whatever I'm going to get paid. So let's take the listing part out of it. And a buyer writes a contract, buyer agency writes a contract and doesn't write in a commission, I don't owe them a commission. That's a massive change and causing a lot of confusion. So you're going to have addendums where you will write what you're being paid into the contract, right? That's going to be an addendum to the contract, and it must be done. And if you don't do it, in theory, other than getting your money from the buyer's agent, right, from the buyer, if they're paying you directly, it's going to have to be written into the contract, right? So yes, if you write into the contract, I would write in that the seller agrees to pay Nest Realty, a fee. And again, just be clear, I don't know if it's going to be, can we call it a commission? No, it's probably going to be a fee. My fee to Nest Realty paid by the seller is X dollars. So it's going to have to be very clear. I'm going to go backwards in a second, but any thoughts on Zillow's new 7-day agreement? Okay, so they've already found the 7-day touring agreement against every part of the lawsuits. So I don't know how Zillow's going to get around this. I think you're going to want to talk, if you're in an area that you're doing Zillow touring or you're taking Zillow leads, please, please, please talk to your brokers, and please also have them check with, your local or state attorneys for forms. Already Zillow's been taken to task by DOJ about the 7-day touring agreement. So I'm not sure how well they'll stand up. And the flip side of that we should be more worried about is, is it valid? Meaning, is it binding to that buyer? Because if DOJ says, nope, those are not, following the rules and the laws, then can we fight to get paid? So I think be really, really careful. I know I missed one. You meet someone at an open house, you direct them to the lender. So the new practice, you should be there for the initial meeting. Oh, I'm in California, open house forms aren't official yet. I don't think you need to be at the meeting, but I think the tie with the lender and the realtor is more important, because think about this. If the seller doesn't offer compensation, so before, it wasn't so much of a discussion unless there was some weird, like if it was a FSBO, we might have had to talk about it. But before, I'm doubting we ever had these conversations. Now, so let's say again, Jonas is my lender and I've met with a purchaser, and let's just say I've agreed to do it for 2%. Let's just for a conversation, right? I've agreed to do this for 2%. Jonas is going to want a copy of my buyer agency agreement. Because let's be clear, realtors, that buyer is signing an agreement with me that they owe me 2%. Because remember, I've got to have these signed before I go show houses. So let's not get caught up in the percent. Now I go show 123 Main Street. The seller's offering 0, nothing. Seller offers nothing. Okay. Doesn't matter what I say. They're offering nothing. Understand the buyer owes me 2%. So this lender, Jonas, needs to be very clear on if the seller has said no. Now I haven't been able to negotiate it in, because let's be clear, we're going to be negotiating it in. I'm going to write it in. Seller strikes it and says, I said no, I won't pay you. So I have a couple options, right? I have to potentially, I got to go to my buyer. Well, how are they going to pay me? So are we going to raise the price of the house? Let's say 2%. Is it going to appraise? Or are they going to come with, instead of a 20% down payment, or they come in with 18, or do they have to come with this much more money? These are conversations that the lenders are going to have with them before we go out. Because if they haven't had this conversation and they're like, yeah, the seller is going to pay you 2%, your fee is 2%. We go to the house, the seller offers nothing, and now they got to find money. That's not going to go well. It is not going to go well. So to me, I've agreed to this fee. I have a lender meeting, or they have the meeting with the lender. I frankly, and I've talked to Todd about this actually. So there's a very cool form that shows like, okay, the purchaser's closing costs, assuming that the compensation is paid. Here's how much more money if the compensation is not paid based on what I'm charging. There has to be this clarity, right? So let's be clear. It's not, oh my gosh, I forgot to, no one talked about this. We were going to sell this house. The buyer needs to come up now with $15,000. Hey, Jonas, find me $15,000. Have fun. Like that doesn't work, right? So we can't, let's be clear, lenders, realtors, sorry, we can't be like, oh, the lender, I'm sure they can find 15 grand. Everyone has more money. You know what I mean? If you're going to do a great job representing your clients, right? And so if I charge, let's just say it, 3%, and then I say, great, you're going to go get pre-approved. I've got to be clear on the cash on hand. I've got to be clear on the rules for different types of financing. VA is now allowing some concessions to be, put into contracts. We've got to be clear on that. And there's nothing worse than going and finding a house. I'm charging 3%. The seller's offering nothing. What's my conversation going to be? Ooh, I'm sure you got some money. Can Aunt Tilly give? Nuh-uh. Right? Like we've got to be clear on that. So guys, this is a big part of what we need to do too, is these conversation up front. Let's see. How do you think NR will be policing these agreements? Oh, here's the problem. I don't think NAR is going to be policing these agreements. NAR is behind now because they've got 50 however many states, right? We've got all the states coming up with different agreements which are independent from NAR. So quite honestly, what we're seeing in Virginia is NAR's kind of going, hey, here's all the information. Don't get me wrong. There are very clear resources through NAR. They're emailing you guys all the time. Here are the FAQs. Here's what you must have. Here's language you must use. I mean, there's pages and pages. They're not about to come into the states and say, California, you do this. Because again, we all do things a little differently. So NAR is not policing the agreements. DOJ is policing the agreements. And this Consumer Federation of America is policing the agreements, right? And that also means, think about this, because for all of us as realtors, and we think, okay, we're not going to do anything about it. If you're working with a buyer and that buyer knows you were supposed to get a signed buyer agency agreement because they read the lawsuit, you meet them and you're like, hey, Fred, let's go look at some houses. Cool. Let's write a contract. Now what? Buyer knows there's no agreement. They owe you nothing. You're not their realtor. So I think the more that we kind of think, oh, let's work on a workaround. There's no workarounds, right? So, all right, let me look. I'm worried we were working with buyers that have already signed something and either forgot, didn't understand what they were signing, or not to share. Yes. Who gets the commission if multiple agents have agreements? Oh, yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question, because remember, as we move forward, if 3 realtors have buyer agency agreements, it's the buyer. You can't go after the seller, right? The buyer signed the agreement. No seller signed the agreement. Yeah, this is where that clarity is really important. So again, no NAR. And here's what I will tell you. If you're working with clients, let's say you had a listing last year, right? And you took it off the market, whatever reason, they decided not to sell, or you were gonna list it and you didn't. You better be calling those people before you go back in, or as you're working, and saying, hey, let's have a meeting, or let's have a Zoom about these things. I want to make sure we're really clear, because we're not talking about this so much on this call. This should be another call, but you also have to have very clear conversations with your sellers, right? Number one, as you go into listings, I have to be able to say, so here's my fee. Here's why I charge what I charge. My fee is my fee. Yes, you can negotiate it any way you want. Here's what I charge, right? Because people are like, I don't have to pay you. Okay, cool. And I don't have to list your house. So here's my fee. But secondarily, here's why. Here's the rules. You don't have to pay a buyer agent. You are not required to pay anything. Here's why you should, to me. Here's why. Here's what a buyer agent does. Here's what an incentive does versus disincentivizing them. This is why we should offer a compensation. Now, what you guys should be all be doing, so realtors, if you write anything down from today, anything at all, hoping you got something, is we're about to lose the best data we have on the amount of sellers, for example, that we're paying buyer agency commissions. So you're able to, until they yank that field out, do reports that show don't tell, that show a seller how many, sellers. So if I'm going to go list $1 million house next week, I'm able to see from January until August 14th what those clients were paying. I can print sheets up or make a spreadsheet that says 123 Main Street paid 3%, 456 Main Street paid 3%. I can show 20 homes have sold, 17 of them paid 3%, 3 of them paid 2.5%. What would you like to offer? You're going to start to lose that, but you're going to have to start taking notes. So again, you guys are going to have to be the voice of why, if you believe it, right, that a compensation or a fee or whatever it is should be offered. Number one. Two, on the listing side, you better make sure that they're clear. If they choose to offer nothing, which is their option, the buyer is going to ask for that to be paid. So they can offer it, or that someone can come ask for it. Hold on, let me see. If a buyer cannot afford to pay buyer's agents, can they sign saying that we must find a house where the seller is paying buyer agent commission? No, because you used to be able to, for those of you that used the agreements, but you knew you were going to get paid by the seller, what a lot of people would put in the compensation field is whatever's as offered in MLS. You can't do that anymore. So you have to have a standard fee that you charge. And from that fee, you can negotiate. Now, so if I say, for example, so Jonas, I charge 3%. Let's be clear on a couple of things. I charge 3%, and the seller says, I'll pay 2%. I can meet with Jonas if I choose to and say, hey, I will just charge you 2%. Like, Jonas, they're only offering 2. I will accept that. I can do that. I cannot do the flip. If you sign a listing agreement and say you will accept 2, and the seller offers 3, you get 2. So I want to be super clear on that. People are like, oh, I can say 2, but if a seller offers 3, then I get 3. No, you don't. You get 2. That buyer can use 1% towards closing costs if they want, or the seller can choose not to pay it, but you cannot accept more than your agreement specifies. You can negotiate for less if you choose to. So if they can't afford to pay a buyer's agent, you've got to be then meeting with the lender, right? And I need to say, hey, Jonas, I've got this buyer, they don't have extra cash. So I know they were thinking of putting 10% down. We're going to have to talk about them putting 7% down. Or, you know what? They can't afford to do anything because they're doing, I'm just going to make some of this up, 100% financing, and they just have the money for closing costs. So Jonas, we're going to have to write in that, we're going to have to know that I'm going to have to call every one of these sellers. And if they're not offering compensation, they probably can't buy the house. Like, these are conversations you have to have. So I guess you could write in saying that they can only find a house where the seller is paying, but I think you still have to write in your fee. Your fee has to be there. Now, you can have a conversation with the buyer and say, hey, if you can't pay me, and the seller won't pay me, then we're going to have to figure that out. But you still have to put in a number that you're willing to accept. So hold on. Would you then put in an addendum that you will accept 2.5 versus 3 in your initial contract? I would not. Someone asked, so Gina asked, would you say you'll accept 2.5 versus 3? Well, you can, but if you write in the agreement, you're accepting 2.5 and the seller pays 3, you don't get 3. So let's be clear, you can't take more than the agreement. So I think here's the thing. This is where the clarity has to come. The fee that I charge to work with a buyer is now the fee that I'm charging, that Jonas and I are talking about, that has nothing to do with the seller. Now I have to have conversations about how, if the seller's not paying me, I'm going to write it into the contract first. We're going to potentially have met with Jonas and say, yes, we can afford to go a little bit over, right? We can bring more to closing. We can adjust our down payment. We're going to have all of our strategies down. Ultimately, if the seller won't pay and I have a 3% agreement, and then we look and the buyer says, Marjorie, I just have 2. Like, I can't find another penny. I can choose to amend down. So I just want you guys to be really clear on the difference there. I can't go up. Okay, these questions are great. So for clarification, if the seller isn't offering a commission to the buyer's office and the buyer's commission is out of pocket from the buyer, yes. Or it can be written into, so yes, we can go to the lender, for example. So again, if someone was going to put down 10%, they could then put down 7%. We could try to go over if the house appraises, right? If the house appraises for 10 more, we could raise the price 10,000 and then I could get comp. So there's different ways, but that's the lenders. So it's lender and not Summit specifically, but the lender. And then what do Fannie, Freddie, VA, like what do all of these associations or whatever allow? Okay, hold on. Ooh, all right. Realtors typically do not show buyers unless they have a pre-qualification. I hope so, but that is not true all the time. So should the pre-qualification have a review for the ability to pay buyer broker compensation? I recommend for a form to allow the buyer's broker's compensation to be escrowed with title. Oh, I mean, again, these are all great because, as you all know, this is new for all of us. So what does your state allow? What does can they do in conventional or VA, or what can we figure out at closing? There are going to have to be all kinds of agreements. And in the next year, we're all going to be really clear. So in 6 months, we can probably, as lenders or realtors, teach a class on here's the different strategies we have on negotiation tactics to build these in or pay these outside of closing. But yeah, there can be all kinds of forms that, by the way, if it can't be in the contract, we have to get paid at closing. Right. So there has to be money brought to closing for our compensation. We've never had that either. Right. We were only paid through companies. Nobody could pay me directly. Right. So technically, they probably still are going to have to pay the brokerage. But there's going to be all kinds of crazy. How do we get documentation of what the seller is offering? There's not going to be. So basically, if I want to go show 5 houses, I got to call Jonas, house number 1, say, hey, Jonas, Marjorie Adam, I just made an appointment and showing time to show your listing. What compensation, if any, is your seller offering? And then he's going to tell me, and I'm going to write it down. Then I get to call Kayla, same thing. Then I'm going to call Eugene Summit Funding. I'm just going down who I see. Then I'm going to call Gina. Then I'm going to call Sean. Now I'm calling Grace. There is going to be no way. Now, let's be clear. Another part of the rules the public doesn't need to be aware of is you have all these companies that are now, we'll just create these sites where you can upload your commissions. No, those are against the lawsuit too. So you can't just create a off MLS site where we can just start listing all these commissions. I'm reading about that in Inman too. And I'm like, no, if you get into the meat of the agreement, you can't do that either. So yes, it's going to be a phone call or a text, or I have no idea if people are going to have pre-recorded messages, right? If you want to sell 123 Main Street, press 1. And then here's the commission. I don't know. We're going to have to figure it out. But there is no recorded document. Now, there can be a concessions line in some MLSs, but that we're trying to figure out too, where it can say the seller's offering a concession that can be used towards buyer's agency. I'm not sure if that's going to get ripped out or how that's going to be used. Since none of them are in there yet, it's very hard for me to tell you what we're seeing. So in about 60 days, we'll be able to regroup and see what we're seeing.
Marjorie, I know you wanted to talk about Dallas. We got 5 minutes, girl.
I could do this all day. No idea what time it is. We're rolling. Oh, we can keep going. So just so you know, I'm super excited. So Summit is doing an event in Dallas, and I think if we've got Rebecca on here, she can show it. And it is with the Summit lenders, and realtors are invited. I did one of these about 3 years ago, and it was fantastic. And we were able to work with the realtors, learn from the lenders. It's one day. And what I will tell you is it's $199 to attend. I appreciate it's in Dallas. If you're close to Dallas, great. If you're not, you can get on a plane like I am. But it is a one-day event. And what's fantastic is you're going to learn about, there's going to be realtor and lender, but let's all be clear. If someone says realtor, a lender can learn. And if a lender stands up and says, this is how I do my Tuesday update calls, a realtor can learn. But there's going to be, current client events and market updates and really tactical ways to boost your business, as well as a great networking opportunity, which I love because I learn from all of the realtors across the country. So just so you know, if you scan the very cool QR code, it's $199. It's a whole day, and the coaches and speakers or whoever's there will be hanging out all that night. So you will be able to spend time with them. I'm a huge fan of a download. So anytime I do an event like this, I like to get a group of people together, download what we've learned, what we're struggling with, what we need to work on. I bring all kinds of things. So I'm going to be doing my full buyer presentation, which I did in Eugene. I'm also going to bring my full seller presentation and seller documents and forms and everything that you guys can have access to. And what's super exciting is we're also morphing this into some realtor mastermind coaching as well that we're going to offer. And what I'm most excited about it is it's going to be affordable and helpful. So we want to make this so that people that really need to work on their businesses have this amazing opportunity to do it. So I can't wait. I will be there. Robin, Todd, Jimmy, everyone from Summit will be there. A bunch of realtors are coming. And this is an opportunity if you say, hey, I really need some mindset. I need some professional growth. I need some lead tactics. I need to work on my presentations. I'd love to see you there because I will be there. I don't know if I lost everyone from there.
I think we still got everybody. Marjorie, it is 1 o'clock. Guys, we want to say thank you so much for joining us on our mastermind. Our monthly masterminds are the 3rd Tuesday of every month. And once again, if anybody would like to meet or see the great Marjorie Adam, she will be in Dallas with us in August. Please come hang out with us for the day. You can find her personally